This is Mark Bucinich, senior reporter for LaborPress, and we're here today speaking with Councilman Daniel Dromm. Mr. Dromm, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Great to see you.
Thank you. Mr. Dromm, the window, I guess, is closing on the when the city budget needs to be passed, almost a $70 billion budget. Can you tell us what you find most worrisome in the budget?
I'm deeply concerned about the cuts to child care and to the after-school programs. I think that's one of the most important battles that we have ahead of us in the next week and a half or so, that we have to get a budget done. I was a daycare center teacher, an after-school teacher in the daycare center before I was a public school teacher, and I know firsthand the impact that daycare has on kids who come into the public school system. They are so much more advanced than kids who just come to us without any schooling at all, and people know that early childhood education is one of the most important investments that the city can make. That's why the mayor's position makes absolutely no sense at all. If the mayor is trying to portray himself as an education mayor, he should understand that early childhood is the basis. It lays the basic foundation for kids later on in life. It's been proven in study after study after study that kids who get an early childhood education are more likely to go on to college than kids who don't.
But it's not just this year that there have been cuts or proposed cuts, but there have been cuts for the last 3 years. What can the city council do? Does it have an opportunity to not only to make sure that the cuts are staved off for this year, but provide funding that make up for the last 3 years? Is that possible?
Well, we've seen a tremendous assault on daycare and early childhood education. When I was in daycare was something that was beginning to come about because of the will and the desire of women to be in the workforce. It was to help women who were on public assistance get into the workforce or stay in the workforce. So without that, there's an economic disadvantage to the city, because what are these women going to do but to go back on public assistance? So there is an economic advantage to the city to make sure that we have daycare programs. Now, the assault on these programs began 3, maybe 4 years ago when the mayor started to move kindergarten out of the daycare centers and into the public school system. And there's very big differences between the care that young people get in daycare centers and what they get in the public schools. First of all, there was an after-school component that came with kindergarten in a daycare center. There were 3 teachers in the classroom in daycare centers. In the public schools, there's 1, maybe sometimes 2 if the class size is large enough. But, it's one of our most valuable assets. So we need to go back and we really need to look at the cost for that. I don't know how hopeful we can be this year to get that in the budget. I think what we're really looking to do, to be honest with you, is to fight to keep funding levels at the level at which they were last year. And there's an additional problem with the early childhood cuts as well, which is that now that they're implementing the Early Learn program, many centers, for example, in the neighboring district to mine, I don't have any daycare centers in my district, but it's an important issue to me nevertheless. The NAACP was the sponsor of a daycare center. They're taking it out of the hands of the NAACP and giving it, I believe, to the Episcopal Church. Now, the Episcopal Church is a good organization, I'm sure, but they're not the NAACP, who ran this center for 40 years in that community and knows that community. So we are trying to confront this on all different levels. 1, from the idea of who is going to be the sponsor of these daycare centers moving forward, and 2, the funding. So I think that's the battle that we have ahead of us in terms of this budget. The longer-term goal should be to increase more early childhood slots. This is how we keep people in the workforce. This is how we keep people off the public assistance rolls. That's why daycare is so important. And the other issue, I think, and I brought it up today at the press conference, is that this is a women's issue. And women have been under attack. We've seen that on a national level. We've seen that with the contraceptive debate. We've seen it in so many different levels. Women had to fight for the right to be in the workforce, to be treated as equals. Women had to fight to the right to have daycare. And I believe that this is just another assault on women.
For women who rely on these critical daycare centers to remain open, do you know what the cost is? Can you even measure that in economic terms to the city? What it will mean if these daycare centers close?
I'm not sure that you can actually measure the cost of it, because in addition to the advantages that you talked about, there's a whole social component. And when I was in daycare, there was a whole social services component that was there for the parents as well. Most of these daycare centers are in low-income communities, and they rely on the daycare center not just for a place to drop off their kids so that they can go to work, but it's a social center. It's a means of connecting with people who live in the neighborhood. It's a stability, a force for stability in economically disadvantaged communities. So it's hard to measure the economic advantage that these centers provide. But those of us who are on the ground and who know and who've seen daycare centers in operation understand the impact. I believe the mayor is not in touch with communities, and that's why it's so easy for him to say that we can cut these services.
Mr. Dromm, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.